guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm George and today I'm here in Arizona in the southern United States, and this is pretty much a desert state, so very much kind of Wild West vibes. And I'm going on a trail which is Camelback Mountain, and actually when you look at these mountains from a distance, it really does look like the back of a camel. These ones up ahead are just big rocks. They aren't the actual mountain, but they're really interesting shapes, really interesting formations, and the way the light is catching them and creating these very distinctive shadow shapes looks really cool. So I think it would be an interesting motif to paint. But first I'm just going to go on this trail, have a look at some of the views, some of the different rock formations, and then decide what I'm going to paint. So it is really hot. It's about 37 degrees last time I looked at my phone, and they do say to do this trail either in the morning or in the evening when it's coolest, but as they say, mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. That's exactly what I'm doing. And if you're going to call me a mad Englishman, there's other people running on this trail, so perhaps I'm not the only mad person out here. I'm already sweating and I've only just started the trail really, so let's keep going higher up into the Arizona cliffs on Camelback Mountain. And over there you can actually see kind of the break between the rocks. You can see Phoenix city center. Phoenix, the capital city of the state of Arizona. Yet to visit, actually. I'm going to try and visit Phoenix. I'm staying in Scottsdale, which is a small towny bit on the outskirts of Phoenix. I'm really glad that I've got a few days here that I'll be able to do a few different paintings and make a few different YouTube videos for you guys to enjoy as well. I do have a sort of idea about what I want to paint. Definitely I want to paint these interesting rock formations and the shadows and the light which is getting cast on them. But I do also want to paint some of these giant cactuses or cacti that I'm seeing around, and they're dotted all over Phoenix. Really big cactus, sort of the size of a small tree. Some even like the size of a reasonably sized tree, massive. So I think they're definitely very iconic to Arizona. A lot of the cars' number plates have cactuses on them, and I think these sort of sandy coloured rocks with a big green cactus and that blue desert sky would make for quite a nice and unique painting. So that's the sort of vista I'm in search of. Maybe the case they end up going to the top and then coming back down again. Everyone thinks, you know, to paint a painting you've got to get to the best view, but sometimes a vista, a view, isn't always necessarily the most interesting subject to paint. Obviously a vista poses its own challenges, whereas sometimes an up close, more detailed painting can be just as interesting. Remember, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. It really means a lot to me if you hit that subscribe button, and if you have already, then thank you so much. I do really appreciate that. So look at that view behind me. Look at that massive vista of Arizona, and it really is flat, and then you get these huge mountains popping up out of the plains. Really interesting landscape. So after climbing all the way to the top, I've decided the most interesting view is actually down here at the bottom, and the reason for that is I really want to paint one of these giant cactuses, and also the rock formations are really interesting. And it's often the case that if you go to a really interesting rock formation or mountain, you have a desire to climb it and see the view, but sometimes the most interesting thing is actually that rock formation, and often the best way to appreciate it is down below, where you can look up at it and see it in all its magnificence. And that's certainly the case with this rock formation here and this cactus, which is absolutely massive. I mean, we can take a quick look about how much taller it is than me. Yeah, absolutely huge cactus. So I definitely want to have this in the foreground, as these giant cactuses and these kind of sandy red rocks are quite iconic to Arizona, and I've never seen a cactus that big in my life, so that'll be quite a nice thing to have in the foreground of the painting, leading the viewer's eyes up towards the rocks. So I'm going to paint here. Please do subscribe to my channel and let's start painting. I'm painting on an oil primed linen canvas that I've taped to my board and toned with a thin wash of raw umber paint. I've wiped away some of this paint in the top right hand corner, as I know this section is where I'm going to paint the sky, so it will be easier to do this on a light, dry section of the canvas. Here I'm sketching in the main lines of the composition using raw umber paint, and I'm really trying to focus on the big shapes. I like how the rock formation on the left leads the viewer's eyes through the composition and down and across into this giant cactus. Here I'm painting the blue desert sky. For the colour mix above the horizon, I'm using mostly cerulean blue and titanium white, with a small bit of ultramarine blue added to this mix. As I paint higher up in the sky, I use a colour mix consisting of the same colours, but more ultramarine blue and less cerulean blue and white. Here I'm painting in the shadow shapes using thinned down raw umber, alizarin crimson and a touch of ultramarine blue. As I paint these shadow shapes, I try to see them as abstract shapes in the rock and focus on getting the character of the shapes before I pay attention to the details of reflected light and occlusion shadows within the shapes. One thing I find helpful when painting shadow shapes is to try and see faces within the shapes, as the human eye is very receptive to faces, so it will be easier to get the character of the shapes more accurately this way. For example, on the lower section of rocks on the left hand side, I can see with a bit of imagination what looks a bit like two huge skulls in profile looking towards the middle of the painting. The skulls look more like that of a monkey or archaic human, as they have a brow but no forehead. Comment below in the comment section if you can see what I mean, and if you use this technique of seeing faces and shapes to help with your drawing. I'd be curious to know. So one thing you have to take into consideration when painting shadows in nature from life is that the sun is constantly moving, so the shadow shapes will change throughout the duration of the painting. So this is why I like to sketch the shadow shapes in first, as I'm basically going to stick with my initial drawing, and I will reference the shadows for the colour and the intricacies within the shadows, but I'm not going to change the shapes, as when painting from life you kind of have to pick a moment in time and then try and capture that. Once I've painted the shadow shapes, I'm now painting the light sections with thicker paint. I'm using a mix of titanium white, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium red and a small touch of ultramarine blue to neutralise the orange slightly, as blue is the complement of orange as it sits on the opposite side of the colour wheel. So by adding a bit of blue it will neutralise the chroma of the orange. I'm now also refining the colour shifts within the shadows, as shadow colour is dictated by a combination of the local colour of the object and the reflected light that the shadow is receiving. For example, the cast shadows which are facing towards the sky have a bluer purplish hue as they're receiving light from the blue sky, whereas the shadows which are angled downward have a redder oranger hue due to the reflected light from the surrounding rocks. So whatever objects are facing the shadow will impact the colours of the shadows, which is why, for example, if you're painting a portrait or a still life and you want really dark shadows, if you hang a bit of black drapery around it, you'll get really dark shadows. Whereas if you wanted the shadows to have a different hue to them, you could change the colour of the drapery around the object or around the sitter, and this would impact the shadow colour. So unfortunately my camera cut out during the painting, so at this stage I'm now just adding a few subtle details to the overall scene and just bringing the scene to a finish. So I hope you've enjoyed that video of me painting this scenery in Arizona. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you do give a super thanks, I'd really appreciate that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.